Hi guys, welcome once again to my little slice of the internet where we're going to be taking a little bit of time to talk about what I consider to be some of my favourite album sequels of all time. Now of course the idea as to what is an album sequel can be quite contentious, is it a direct follow-up or is it merely a thematic or narrative follow-up? It doesn't matter, We're going to be looking maybe at a little bit of both of these kind of things, and I just want to preface this as well by stating that this top 5 is in no way indicative of, number 5 being better than number 2 or anything like that. There is so very little between the rankings in this list that you might as well just ignore the numbers, whatever. And just take this as a simple list of 5 album sequels that I really, really love. Now what we're going to do is we are going to take a little bit of a look at the album that preceded it so we can see and understand a bit more of where this, the sequel came from and how important that sequel is in taken in context with the original. So with that being said, let's cut the kerfuffle and get straight down to business with number 5, where we will be looking at Big Big Train's English Electric Part 2 and of course its predecessor English Electric Part 1. I'm a huge fan of Big Big Train. Haha, see what I did there? Huge, big, very clever. Totally just happened there. Whatever. Big fan, love the band, and it was the English Electric Part 1 that really got me into the band in the first place. Back in 2012, I was kind of starting to listen to music more seriously, and there was a lot of really strong records that came out that year that just, really connected with me, and English Electric Part 1 was absolutely one of those. So it stands to reason that I was incredibly hyped for the sequel, English Electric Part 2. And I'll be real with you all, I was slightly disappointed when it actually came out, but that's only really because of how strong I felt English Electric Part 1 was. This is no damning indictment of English Electric Part 2. It is a phenomenal record. It is superb, and I love it very much. We're going to have a little dance right here, because that's how much I love it. We're going to have a little dance like that. No, there is so much on this record that I really do enjoy. And the overall vibe that you get from the English Electric albums as a whole is exactly that. These are supremely British. Just the idea of Englishness and what it means to be British has been distilled into music within these records, and it is extraordinary when you listen to it. You can feel that sort of countryside atmosphere, that kind of old school industrial revolution feel to it, like the working man, the union representatives, and then just country houses and just like cheese and cucumber sandwiches sitting out there in like a Cornish countryside or whatever. It's all in here. It's all distilled into these two records. But I do feel that the sequel, English Electric Part 2, whilst I kind of felt it lacked a little bit of the accessibility of the first record, which is why I loved that one so much. That sacrifice is not in vain, because what we do have on this one instead is a great deal more scope for creativity and more adventurous instrumentation and all that kind of thing. And no more is this obvious than on the opening track, East Coast Racer, which for my money is one of the best long-form tracks that the band has ever put out there. But honestly, when it comes down to it, I kind of prefer the slightly more accessible tracks on this album. Swan Hunter, Worked Out, Leopards, and Keeper of Abbeys. That 4-hit combo is just wonderful, and especially Keeper of Abbeys. That is the song that I will always come to on this album if I want a little bit of a pick-me-up. If I'm feeling down, if I'm feeling a bit, a bit blue, whatever, I know that Keeper of Abbeys will pick me right back up there. But yeah, English Electric Part 2. Excellent sequel. Builds on what the first one did quite admirably, while still managing to be, maintain its own sense of identity. But if you're not sure which one to get, just, pick up the Full Power set. English Electric Full Power, the sort of they mashed them together and added a couple of extra bits and pieces. That's obviously the definitive article, but hey, if you don't want to do that and you want them both, get them both. Both fantastic records. Okay, moving on to number 4. It is the double hit combo of Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells 1 and Tubular Bells 2. Now I am of course aware of the fact there have been quite a number of Tubular Bells records. There's there is a Tubular Bells 3, obviously I think there's the Millennium Bell as well, I think. And then they had that sort of thing that came out, I think this year, or was it last year? The unreleased intro Tubular Bells 4, which is I don't know if that's even going to happen overall, but whatever. Tubular Bells is obviously like, it really needs no introduction. It's one of the records of prog. It's one of the records of popular music. It launched Virgin Records. It was a flagship album for that label, you know, one of the biggest labels in the world. It sold millions of copies. Everybody knows it. Everyone goes, oh, it's the ones like The Exorcist. Oh, yes, very clever. We know. Yes, it was used in The Exorcist. Well done. Clap, clap. But if you listen past the intro, past those little twinkling pianos and sinisterness, you will find one of the most interesting albums ever made. But for me, anybody who's watched my recent vinyl update video will know that I prefer the sequel. I just do. I do. I grew up with the sequel. I heard this long before I heard Tubular Bells 1. And this is the one which has stuck with me. You know, this is the earworm for me. This is my association. If somebody says Tubular Bells to me, I am thinking of the tracks on this album, you know, not on this album. Ugh, shoot me, I don't care, whatever. I love Tubular Bells too. It is such a rush. It is a phenomenal album and absolutely sits there at like number 4 as my one of my favourite album sequels of all time. Okay, we are moving on again. We are now in territory of number 3, where we are going to briefly talk about Meat Loaf with Bat Out of Hell 1 and Bat Out of Hell 2, Back into Hell. Much like Tubular Bells, this is a situation where I heard the sequel before I heard the original, so, you know, blame my youth for this or whatever, or what was available to me at the time of growing up when I first heard these records. But of course I will always have the association of hearing the second before the first, which is fine, you know, and I really do feel that even taken with my, you know, weird biases and my kind of rose-tinted specs into account, I do still feel that the second part is the better record. The sequel is better than the original, you know, I mean, heaven forbid. It does happen sometimes. This may not be a popular take, or maybe for some people even a correct take, but, you know, what is taste in music? There is no right or wrong, ultimately. But it's my take. I love Bat Out of Hell 2. I adore that record. It is everything the first one was, dialed up past 11 and into 12. Because it is the most absurd, ridiculous, over-the-top, overblown, unashamed, just maximalist nonsense, and I love it so much. I don't care how stupid it is. I don't care how much it is, how extra it gets. Every second of that record just sits with me, and I love it to death. Let's take a quick look at some of the absolute corkers on here. We've got, look, I mean, come on. I'd do anything for love, but I won't do that. Come on. Everybody knows this song. Huge hit, massive long song, too long for radio play, and that Beauty and the Beast inspired music video, mwah, amazing. But of course it's much more than that, because you've got things like Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through, which is this wonderful, uplifting ballad. You've got Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire, excellent stuff. Wasted Youth, followed by Everything Louder Than Everything Else. I will die a happy man if I ever get to see that performed on stage, because I could sing my heart out to that and never get bored of that song. It's incredible. And then of course we just dial it down a bit, incredibly soft, beautiful songs such as Lost Boys and Golden Girls that closes off the record. It just shows such a great emotive side to Meat Loaf, and I absolutely love it. One of my favourite records of all time, not just one of my favourite sequels, and absolutely deserving of the spot here in the top 5. Okay, here we go. Now, I know I said earlier that the top 5, you know, what position it is, doesn't matter, but you know, I'm still up here thinking, does it really not matter? Can I really justify putting this above that? And I had to make a judgment call. I had to make a judgment call as to which one of these was at 2 and which one of these was at 1. So, let's see how well people know me. I'm going to give you half a second to try and guess what number 2 could be. Yeah, got it? Think you got the answer? Okay, well, let's go. It is, in fact, The Deer Hunter, Act 5. Hymns with the Devil in Confessional. The sequel to The Deer Hunter, Act 4, Rebirth, in reprise. These 2 records were game changers for me, once again. Like, much like with Big Big Train back in 2012 when those came out, and they really just opened my eyes to what I could expect from, you know, that sort of symphonic prog kind of thing. The Deer Hunter, I discovered them with Act 4 back in 2015, I want to say. Is it 2015? Yes, 2015. 2015, the Act 4 came out, and again, it was a game changer for me. It's a ridiculous album. It showed me that incredible blend of prog and indie rock, and that you can marry these two things together and create something so much more than the sum of its parts. And I was addicted. I was so hopelessly addicted to this record. I listened to this non-stop for like the entire year. Like, I don't think I listened to anything else more than this. So obviously, what was I going to do except be hyped as all hell for the sequel? You know, Hymns with the Devil and Confessional, Act 5, by the Deer Hunter, is absolutely unbelievable. It takes everything that 4 was and sort of builds on top of it. The leitmotifs are back in greater strength. There's something so crazy about how many callbacks happen across the course of this record. But I mean, you could argue that across the course of the entire Acts series. Because obviously I went back and listened to Acts 1 through 3 after I was obsessed with 4 for the longest time. Even though it did take me a while to actually get through Acts 1 through 3, because it took me a little bit of getting used to like the production values on there and the slightly more stripped down instrumentation compared to 4 and 5. But 5 really did strike a chord with me unlike anything else, because although we are allegedly getting Act 6 at some point, and I believe it's supposed to be called The Hanged Man, don't quote me on that, I've just seen some like artwork floating around which depicts that. But obviously Casey Crescenzo and the rest of the Deer Hunter are currently working on the Antimai series of records that has now started up with the whole Deer Hunter thing, moving into like new territory. So will we ever get Act 6? I hope so. But in some ways, it kind of makes Act 5 a little bit more special, because this feels like the end, you know, the final chapter, the closing off of everything. And it makes you kind of think about the tracks on this with a little bit of a different light. I had debated putting, you know, Act 4, the sequel to Act 3, up here. But then I realised, as much as I love Act 4, and as affecting as Act 4 was, my excitement for Act 5 was so much greater than what I experienced for Act 4, just precisely because of how much that had an impact on me to make this one feel like such an exciting thing to come out. And it didn't disappoint. It absolutely didn't disappoint. Everything on this record is fire. There is not a single duff moment to be found on this. And if you've not listened to any of the Act series by the Deer Hunter yet, good lord, do yourself a favour. Start at 1, go up to 5, thank me later, you will have the time of your life. So, what could number 1 possibly be? If it's not the Deer Hunter, then what, pray, the hell is it? Okay, so the main reason why I felt a little bit funny about doing this one as my number 1 pick was because it's... is it strictly speaking an album sequel? No. Not strictly speaking. Some more sort of like astute viewers out there, I'm sure, are probably giving themselves a good idea as to what it is based off that clue. But I'll just go ahead and say it. My number 1 pick for the greatest album sequel of all time is Parallax 2 Future Sequence by Between the Buried and Me. The sequel to Parallax Hypersleep Dialogues, the EP. Haha, you see why this isn't an album sequel, but I don't care, this is my list and I can break the rules if I want to. Yeah, okay, all joking aside, Parallax 2 Future Sequence is one of the greatest records ever made. I'm going to go out and say this. The only reason why I still consider Colours to be a superior record and still sits at the top of my best albums ever list is purely for the sort of, the time in my life impacts it had on me, the way it changed the game for me, the way it sort of brought me into that sort of extreme metal, that extreme kind of music. Obviously, by the time Parallax 2 came out, I was already well on board the Between the Buried and Me train, and I didn't need any more convincing that this was my kind of music. But Colours did that for me, which is why it's still at the top of the pile, you know. But that being said, this record is absolutely unreal. There is not a single moment of dead space or wasted air on this, and I adore it. It obviously comes as a sequel to the extended play of the Parallax Hypersleep Dialogues, as we have already mentioned, but to call this an extended play, a basic EP, feels a little bit, you know, unfair. This is just over 30 minutes of music, so I know some long-playing records that are like about that length, so, but that's, you know, that's just progressive metal for you. An EP being about the same length as somebody else's LP, you know, whatever. But this did mean, of course, that Parallax 2 was everything that the first EP was and more besides. It builds on everything that happened in there. There's so many callbacks, both lyrically and musically, and it's just absolutely stunning. 72 minutes long, and not a single minute of it is wasted. Everything works, everything makes sense. There's so much layering, so much complexity to this record that I don't even know where to begin. I love this album with my whole heart. I will never not love this album. This is such a special record to me that I don't know, even if you're sort of like on the fence about, you know, the more extreme side of progressive metal and you can't stomach growling, and I get that, you know, I do get that growling is not for everybody. The quality of the music on this, the quality of the lyricism, the quality of this, just the attention to detail that's been put into the production of this album, and how good everything sounds, how full and just absolutely rhythmically perfect everything sounds, cannot be understated. And I just had to put this at number one. I know, it's not an album sequel, blah, 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 don't care. This still ranks high as not just the greatest album sequel of all time for me, but also one of the best albums I've ever listened to and I've ever owned. Still trying to keep my eye out for it on vinyl, but it's very expensive. So my little compact disc will have to do for now. So there we go, there we have it. That is my pick for the top 5 album sequels of all time. There we go, there's your clickbait headline there. Haha, I'll put it there like, woo, and then maybe people will click the video, I don't know. Or don't click it, I don't care, you know, whatever. So what I'd really like to know though is what missed my list, you know? What are your favourite album sequels? You know, the ones that really ticked it for you. I would love to know what they are. Maybe I've listened to them, maybe I've not. Maybe I should check out the ones that inspired the sequels. Please let me know what your favourites are in the comments down below. As you know me, I always love listening to new stuff, so please do let me know about them. If you did enjoy this video as well, please do share it with anybody else who you think would enjoy it. And please do consider subscribing to the channel for more content if you've enjoyed what you've seen today. I'm also going to include a link tree down below in the comments where you can find me on all my various other social media places and what have you, as well as a link to my Ko-fi page where if you really enjoy what I do, you can potentially consider giving me a once-off donation to help support the channel. It would be really appreciated. But until next time, guys, keep your rhyme signatures very, very odd.